Welcome to the first edition of the Arsenal Teacher, where you can learn, chat, and debate about the beautiful game, also known as soccer or football, depending on where you're from. First, I just want to share a little bit about myself and how I became an Arsenal fan and what this game means to me and how it's created me as a person. If anybody remembers the Yogo Bonita era of soccer, that was my generation. And I can specifically remember those Nike videos that came out and Henry dribbling through the streets. And that moment there sticks in my mind, and that's when I remember becoming an Arsenal fan. And I live, breathe, sleep, eat Arsenal, and playing the beautiful game. But one other thing that I'm really good at is sharing my passion with other people, teaching and creating space for people to learn about the sport that I love so much, and the communities it creates as fans, players, and those who feel passionate about the game. I was a former high school math teacher, and I coached soccer in some amazing teams in A-Leaf, Houston, Texas. And I'm looking at ways to feel connected with fans, players, and anyone who wants to connect and chat about the game. Doesn't matter your experience level. You may not even have watched a game before. We'll have content for you. You may be someone who is very tactically involved and wanting to know different formations, or what's this new formation with Arsenal playing this 2-3-5 formation. We will answer questions from all spectrums and all knowledge areas, because one thing that I want to do is bring people into this game because it has shaped my life so heavily. And what I also realize is I just love to chat about the game with people all over the world, and all over the US or internationally. Not only that is, I know that many clubs have rich histories. Arsenal has been around since 1886, and you can't recreate those things. And not only that is, I want to learn about other people's clubs. What is your passion for your club? What is your history? How do you do your fandom from your club? I also enjoy showing off my Arsenal jerseys in public because it's often a conversation starter, whether it has brought some unwelcome shouts or those hate-steam shouts from rival fans, or maybe some of those people that really do live and breathe Arsenal in the way that I do. But I know that I can always laugh off the people and have a quality discussion, and really have a rich discussion about the sport, what's happening, how things are moving forward. But one thing I have to say, what do you think of Tottenham? Give that a look. Search Arsenal, learn about the club and what made me a fan. Welcome to this open space for fans all over the world. And just a reminder, there are no dumb questions. Everyone's respectful opinion is welcome. And we will begin now. So, to kick off this podcast, I want to share with you a short video of my first Arsenal game, which happened a few weeks ago. I had the pleasure of attending the Arsenal FC, actually I think it was more the Florida FC, but we can call it Arsenal FC, series in Orlando, to see Arsenal for the first time, up close and personal. I got basically front row seats to the Arsenal Orlando game, and got some really good seats to the Arsenal-Chelsea game, the London derby in Orlando. And what I think what shocked me the most is I didn't think I could have a reaction like the one I did. I had goosebumps and chills and a whole lot of overwhelming emotions. Even when I'm talking about it now, it's bringing back those emotions. And I hadn't experienced those before. Some might say it was stardom, but it feels bigger than that, more powerful, because a club is bigger than any one person. Players come and go, but the club remains. And this club, Arsenal, has mottos. It has history. And I've never been a groupie of a celebrity, but I know one thing about this club. I love Arsenal. I truly love Arsenal. It's the reason why I wake up at 6 in the morning and watch them on a Saturday morning. It's the reason why I'm listening to other podcasts and constantly talking about it I'm sure my friends, family have gotten sick of my fandom, but that's why I'm channeling it into this and expressing this with other people. So right now I want to share with you my experience of fandom, and maybe it resonates with you just a little bit. Welcome back. I truly hope you enjoyed that video as much as I did creating it and having that journey, seeing my favorite club in person. I hope you're an Arsenal fan, and if you're not, I hope that made you appreciate what it's like to be an Arsenal fan, and maybe we can convert you one day. If you think I'm crazy, then I know I did a good job. If you connected with that video, I think I hit the mark. Sorry about all the background noise. We have a storm passing by right now, so hopefully it's not picking up too much in this mic. But some of the highlights of that trip were getting my jersey signed by Danielson, who was a former Arsenal player and Brazilian, and that was my Gabriel Jesus jersey, who is a Brazilian player that we just signed this season. And it felt kind of like a passing of the torch. And what we've seen in preseason from Gabriel Jesus is that he is quite the center forward that we've been missing in previous years. And the second highlight for me was standing next to that Invincibles trophy. We are Arsenal the club. We are the only club that has played a full Premier League season without losing a single game, and we are called the Invincibles. And there's some famous players like Thierry Henry, Dennis Bergkamp, Patrick Vieira, just to name a few, that really are sensational players. And I would, press you guys to go and watch some of their clips to kind of get a feeling of what Arsenal may have been in the past, and how that DNA through our club hopefully will manifest in seasons to come. Now, those who have followed Arsenal in recent years know we've missed out on European football over the last 2 seasons, finishing 8th place 2 seasons in a row. And it's been a painful last decade as an Arsenal fan. But I think this could be the season. Well, actually, we did finish 5th place last season, so we are back in Europe. But we always want to be in the top 4. And I think this season hopefully is that season that, like Arteta, our manager, had said, where everything goes boom. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but I think there's a new feeling around this club. And we have this fresh passion among the fans, among the players, new players, old players, and there's really a momentum shift. So I hope to bring you along on the journey of Arsenal in this season as a supporter, and bring this game to an accessible place for everyone, whether you're an Arsenal fan or not an Arsenal fan, whether you follow the MLS, whether you plan on following the World Cup. And we will have some World Cup content coming up in subsequent episodes. We'll talk about what it means to have the World Cup in November and December as opposed to having it in the summer, and the impact to the Premier League, but also bring you up to speed on how the U.S. National team is developing players and trying to compete in the World Cup. But let's move on to this episode. So on this episode, I plan on discussing 2 topics. First, the opening weekend of the Premier League. What can we expect from this season? Can we expect more Jurgen Klopp excuses about a dry pitch and why his team couldn't beat Fulham? Or maybe Mitrovic, maybe the lethal striker people thought he could be years ago, and has shown in the Championship, which is the 2nd league in England. And can he finally make that impact in the Premier League? I don't know. I'm having fewer doubts after seeing him this morning. And the second topic we will discuss is the 5-sub rule. And also, I'm going to talk about that through the lens of an Arsenal fan and an Arsenal as a club. Now, of course, at the same time, I'm going to be as partial and as objective as possible, unless we're talking about Spurs, because like one of my friends told me today, I never can give Spurs the credit, which is probably true, so I'm not even going to fight him on that one. So let's talk about the new season and some of the big changes, the new teams to the league, and some predictions on what I hope to see from Arsenal this season. Let's just talk about the 3 teams that were promoted. So we have Nottingham Forest, we have Fulham, which seems to be a back and forth with them. Nottingham Forest have not been in the league in many, many years, and we have Bournemouth that are back. So we're going to have to see how they hold up, but we can see that Fulham has started off strong by having a tie with Liverpool today, 2-2. And that's kind of where that quote came from, where Jurgen Klopp was saying the pitch was too dry. He's used that excuse before, but if anybody else watched the game, we knew that Liverpool was not playing at their best. So who do you think is going to win the league? Would love to hear your comments. Who do you think is going to get top 4? Where do you think Arsenal's going to finish? I think there's some interesting topics to be discussed about how much money is being spent in the Premier League. It is one of the leagues that has the most money currently. And we've got some new oil money coming in from Newcastle. So let's just go through a few of the top teams. I'm just going to do a little overview of Man City, Liverpool. We'll talk about Chelsea. I'm going to skip Tottenham. And I'm going to bring up Newcastle just for a moment, just to kind of highlight some of those things. And we'll talk about some of the signings that Arsenal brought in. So let's start with Man City. Or maybe just Man City and Liverpool to kind of tie these things together. Is this the year of the striker? Man City has used a formulation that's really been based a lot on midfielders, but they spent real big in Haaland, who is an enormous presence on the field, and it'll be interesting to see how he adapts. He's a young player still, but he's a force to be reckoned with, as we've seen in Germany, and, you know, there's a lot of belief from Pep in Haaland based on the money that they spent, but also him being played in some of these bigger games. So it'll be interesting to see how Man City changes their stance and how they rotate players. Is Haaland going to be a shoe-in every single game, or is Pep going to still continue to rotate players and have, you know, that style of play that doesn't really link up with a striker, you know, a big striker, because they don't tend to cross the ball too often. It's a lot of dribble, pass, dribble, pass, dribble, pass, find space, move players around. So it'll be interesting to see how Man City adapts with a striker like Haaland leading their front line. Let's talk about the next big striker that joined the league, Darwin Núñez, that just signed for Liverpool. Seems to be a pretty good player based on what I'm seeing. You know, I've seen him play in the Champions League. He does make some really good runs, and I think that's something that Liverpool has needed. You know, Robbie Firmino, he's had, you know, he's done well, but he's not necessarily the goal scorer that, you know, some would expect from a top striker, but he does get into the right positions. But I think that added layer that Núñez is going to bring is that those runs into the box, those quick shifts to shoot quickly into the box and, you know, score goals pretty regularly. But what I'm concerned for Liverpool and Liverpool fans is their squad depth. It seems like they didn't really sign enough players, specifically maybe in their midfield. You know, this morning we saw Thiago Silva pick up a hamstring injury in the first game. What does that mean for them? You know, hamstring injuries tend to take a little bit longer to heal from. And will that impact them going forward? It seems like they already had a rough start to this season as they tied 2-2 against Fulham, who is a newly promoted team. And that generally doesn't happen when, you know, for a team like Liverpool to drop points in the first game. I'm sure Jurgen Klopp is livid with his team, but, you know, Arsenal on top. Let's talk about Chelsea real quick, as they picked up one of Man City's former players and a former Liverpool player, Raheem Sterling. And how does that change Chelsea's formation? You know, it seems like they're going away, obviously, from Lukaku and Timo Werner. So is Sterling that missing piece that Chelsea's been needing for the past year or so? You know, they're also under some new ownership. It's interesting to kind of see, who are they in for? It seems like it's just a rebuilding year, but they're also just willing to spend money on players, but do they actually fit their system? Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you know, these top 3 teams that we continue to see doing well in the Premier League, but it seems like they all might be going through some sort of transformation. You know, Mane left Liverpool, so there are some other things that are going on amongst the top players. So would love to hear your thoughts on those 3 teams or any of the other teams that weren't discussed. I'm going to move on to Newcastle real quick because I think there's just something interesting going on with Newcastle as they continue to spend big. They're definitely in a different phase than those top teams. You know, they're a mid-table team, but they have the resources now to continue to build and bring in players. The hardest thing I think they have, the hardest challenge I think they have right now is bringing in players without Champions League So it's going to take them some time to bring in really, really top players, but I think Bruno Guimaraes is a quality midfielder that they got last season, and he should have some time. He's had some time to adapt, and he looked pretty good at the end of the season. And unfortunately, we did not play well against Newcastle, so that one still stings a bit. But it'll be interesting to see how they cope with the new season. And I'm really excited to kind of see how Joe Willock does, because he's a former Arsenal Hale End, one of our academy players. And I am an Atlanta United season ticket holder, and I always root for Miguel Almiron. So you might hate me for that, but those are two players that I do like to see succeed, hopefully not at the detriment of Arsenal. So let's move on to the next piece of this podcast and talk a little bit more about the 5-sub rule, and I'll talk about that in context of Arsenal and how that might help them adapt, but also in the context of the Premier League and how that is relevant for the Premier League in terms of European play. So let's talk about the sub rule. What is this new 5-sub rule? Well, if you're not familiar with soccer or football, in a game, there's 11 on 11, and each team can only sub 3 times. Did I say 4, 5, 3? 3 times. But that rule has changed now, and now they can sub 5 times. And that does add an extra layer of complexity to the game, tactical formations, how you can rest players, how you can develop young players, right? So I don't know why this one came to my head first as a topic about this upcoming season, but I figured it'd be one that, a lot of other people haven't talked about, maybe haven't considered. We've seen glimpses of this 5-sub rule when COVID was coming around and we were trying to adapt to a new way of playing. The other European competitions actually kept that 5-sub rule, and we had to witness Premier League teams with the 3-sub rule versus the 5-sub rule. And that really hurt, I think, some of the English teams in the European competitions because, one, the season's a bit more condensed in certain areas. We've heard, coaches complain about, too many games during the holiday periods in November and December. But also not having enough subs can really, really run players into the ground. And, having these 2 additional subs for the game, I think will really benefit, one, the players for injuries, tactical development, but also the English Premier League to be able to compete in European competitions on an equal playing field. So what does this mean for Arsenal? Well, I think what we have to start thinking about first are the players that Arsenal have signed over the last 2 summer transfer windows. We signed Tomiyasu, Ben White, Zinchenko, Jesus. I'm going to throw Thomas Partey in there just for the sake of argument, and Odegaard. And the profile of these players, we could talk about it for a while, but what I want to focus on in this section is their versatility. Each player can play in multiple positions, play in different spaces, half spaces, and they all have a really, really strong work rate that can help Arteta and Arsenal impact in mid-game to change tactics and formations in different periods of play when they're pressing and when they aren't pressing. So as we think about these new tactical setups, we have to consider the amount of exertion these players are exhibiting throughout the game. And as Arteta has started to advance kind of our more complex tactics, this 2-3-5 formation is coming into view a lot more. So what's happening with this 2-3-5 formation is we've had our left back and our right back. In this case, we've been using Zinchenko and Ben White, and they're playing this more inverted midfield role. And they're, Zinchenko is a midfielder and Ben White is primarily a center back, but he can play in midfield. And again, this is due to that versatility of these players that we've signed, that they can play in this 2-3-5 formation. And with this 2-3-5 formation, we have 2 in the back, 3 in that midfield, and 5 up in that front when we're in possession. And when we're out of possession, we see them drop back into that 4-3-3 formation. And depending on where we're pressing and how we're pressing, things can change a bit, but that's generally the structure that this team takes when we're out of possession. But what we're seeing is that we're pressing higher up the field because we have 5 players further up the pitch, which that means that they're going to be using a lot more energy to press. And we've bought players that can press. We have forwards like Gabriel Jesus that is pressing all the time. Pep Guardiola also mentioned that he's probably the best defensive forward he's ever seen play. Real steal for Arsenal in this case. And we can see how that adding these types of players can impact how we're pressing on the pitch. And Arteta is really designing and pushing our players to press in certain spaces. So there are certain times in the game where, when the defender plays it out to the left back or the right back, the other team plays it out to the left back or the right back, our defenders press. That's what triggers the press. So we can see Odegaard talking and really dictating and being the conductor in the midfield to be able to dictate where our players are pressing, when they're pressing, how they're shifting their bodies so they can, cut off passing lanes and make sure that we're closing off that space, because we've only got 2 defenders in the back, but those 2 defenders are now Gabriel and Saliba, who are big, strong, fast, and they're also really good in possession. So adding these technical players into our team now with this 5-sub rule, we can hold on to possession, we can press high for longer periods in the game because we know that we can bring on some players. And not only that, is we can bring on some young players. So we might see a lot more of, Albert Sambi-Lokonga. We might see a lot more of Marquinhos. Hope to see a lot more of Vieira. But all of these players, we can see they're very versatile. They can play across their positions, and that's going to help us adapt and change in-game scenarios, because not only do we have 5 subs, but the other teams have 5 subs. So they're going to be able to make some different tactical changes. And if we don't have to use subs to make our tactical changes because our players are so versatile, that's really going to open up new possibilities. So I really think this could be the year for Arsenal to see us adapt our playing style, hold the ball in possession a lot more, and see us pressing up higher up the field, because we know we have additional resources that we can utilize, because we've added depth to our team, which we've needed for a long period of time. So I think this 5-sub rule helps Arsenal. I think any team could really benefit from it, but it could really impact some of those lower teams that don't have as much depth. But, for instance, say a lesser team is trying to hold on to a lead, and it's a 1-goal difference. There's 10 minutes in the game. They can put all that effort in and sub and make those changes, those additional changes. So we could see a little bit different tactical switches throughout this season because of the additional subs. And what I really, really like is the ability to bring on those younger players so they get a lot more playing time, and that's really important for their development. So I think the 5-sub rule will change the game a bit. It'll be curious to see how different teams adjust. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. So I would really love to hear your thoughts on what I've discussed on this episode. So feel free to comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'll be placing some paid content on my Patreon site for those looking for more in-depth analysis. I'm going to have to figure out a sign-off, but that will come. In future episodes, I hope to bring in some listeners, some fans, to discuss new topics surrounding the sport. So please reach out if you want to be a part of the project. So for now, thanks for listening. Feel free to send me feedback, comment with your thoughts and opinions. What topics would you like me to cover? It could be as simple as, or as generic as, what is fandom, and unpacking why do people even follow sports in general? Or maybe, what are your thoughts about a possible change in the offsides rule that has been kind of discussed in the ecospheres? Or refs putting their flags up again. I think that's an interesting change that, there's a lot of rule changes that happen, but we can see that they adjust and they're like, I don't know if we like this rule that we changed, and going back to the previous rules. So for now, have a wonderful day. And I hope to continue to bring content that fills you with passion and positivity. So, up the Arsenal.